CLS Talks.
Talk to me.
CLS Talks.
Talk to me.
CLS
Talk
Talks.
to me.
CLS
Talk to
Talks.
me.
Real information.
Talk to me.
Real education.
Talk to me. Talk to me. They don't talk to me. They look like that morning. They don't talk to me. They back that morning. They don't talk to me. They back that morning. They don't talk to me. They back that morning. They don't talk to me. They back.
This is the latest in our Art of War episodes. I'm Lionel Coveney. He's Des Carty. Des, how are you?
I'm grand, Lionel, and he's Lionel Coveney.
I am indeed. So let's continue. Okay, well, the next one, it's a pretty obvious one again in light of what we've just discussed. Appear weak when you're strong and strong when you are weak. If he is superior in strength, evade him. I think that's important. That second line is very important because, again, when I was growing up, I was, not necessarily by parents, but by society, by peers, I was taught always appear strong, never run away from anything. Now, biology gives us a very important tool, fight or flight. So when the adrenaline kicks in, you decide what it is you're going to do. You are perfectly entitled to run away, and sometimes the time is right to run away. Fight when you're strong, but if you're weak, get the hell out of Dodge and then regroup until such a time as you are strong. And that's something that I think certainly it's in the male psyche anyway. It's definitely bred into the men here. You know, you got to be big, you got to be strong, you got to be brave, protect your women, that whole thing.
Yep.
And it's absolute nonsense a lot of the time. There are times when, yeah, that's required, but not always.
Yeah, well, it's like in the court setting, there's a time when you should seek to either adjourn something or leave it till the next day or whatever. And of course, if you get enthralled and if I feel like brought into a court case, they will bring you down the garden, they bring you here, they bring you there, and sometimes you forget, well, there might be time now to leave because it's getting too heavy. So like, find a way to leave if it is getting too heavy, when, as you suggest, you need to regroup and rethink what is going on here. So yeah, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with that. If you perceive the other party at that point in time are superior, get the hell out.
And have your escape strategy planned in advance. Absolutely, because in the heat of battle you won't always see it.
Correct. Okay. The other part was that when you were strong, appear weak, and when you were weak, appear strong. So obviously it's not going to be difficult at the outset of this for anybody to appear weak.
Yeah.
Now, if you find you get a step up somewhere, in other words, this is saying don't let the cat out of the bag. If you find you have an advantage, do not be gung-ho to say, well, I am right on this and you're wrong. Because as soon as you put it out there, they'll find a strategy to counter that. It's like playing a game of chess. If you move your best move without actually creating a trap, you're going to be got.
It comes back to our Gary Doyle order.
Yeah.
They're obliged, once we request it, to give us all the cards that they're playing, but we don't have to give them ours.
Correct, absolutely. Next one is attack him when he is unprepared, appear when you are not expected. Okay, now I don't imagine there's so much in that sentence that would alone, I'd imagine, take a whole day up for us to cover. But in summary, I just run with it in terms of when they're unprepared. So this is where strategy comes in and plays a big part. If you haven't done your research, you won't recognise when the enemy is unprepared. If you don't realise and have found the information that you need in terms of your spies or doing your research, you will not recognise when somebody is unprepared. So you have to, preparation in this case and research is going to be key to this. And then obviously knowing then when you're not expected to go in and attack.
Yeah, sometimes a simple adjournment can be a useful thing, an adjournment without actually appearing in court.
Yeah.
It can just, sometimes I find, through first-hand experience, disarm the opposition a little bit, and they're not necessarily expecting you to turn up then for an actual case, and as a result they don't necessarily prepare the way they should.
That's very deceptive of you.
I wouldn't dream of deceiving the state or anyone else. The next one, the general who loses a battle makes but few calculations beforehand. So we're on to planning and preparation there. We've discussed that.
If you fail to plan, you're planning to fail, and that's a summary of that, really. You couldn't say much more about it, I don't think, unless you want to.
No, I think that's pretty clear cut. The next quote, there is no instance of a country having benefited from prolonged warfare.
Okay, this goes back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of going to war. basically the state, to a certain extent, their resources are relatively unlimited. But when it comes down to a specific bank or solicitor, barrister, best example would be a barrister is going to have to get paid. A solicitor is going to have to get paid. Now, if they've told the bank this is a straightforward in-out 5-minute job, we'll have the order, bang bang, bish bash bang, whatever it is, and we'll have the job done in 10 minutes. Okay, so they have to go back to the bank. If you find a way then to extend that out to another day, another date, they have to go back to the bank and say, look, we'll have to get paid for this time. And then if you go again and again and again, so the bank have to be looking at, well, how much money is this actually going to cost us? If, say, it's a house, a residential house, and it's worth, say, the mortgage arrears are 200,000, whatever they might be, and this case ends up in the High Court on appeal, or it ends up in the Appeals Court, or in the Superior Court, or in Europe, the bank have to weigh up, right, does this justify spending tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, on solicitors and barristers? So is this party over here, although they've no cost, are benefiting from staying in the house, staying in the home, and yet have been able to drag this case out for years and years and years and years at a cost to the bank. They have to weigh that up. So this is where we'd say to people, and again, I'm sorry going off on a tangent, we're always asked, is there deals to be done with the banks? Well, the straightforward answer is no. Do not put your head into that place when you're starting off, because you're not out to do a deal. The only time a deal comes on the table is when you have hammered 7 shades of whatever out of the other party, when they know they're beaten and they can't continue financially. That's potentially when they might come to you and say, can we do a deal? But never go in with the mindset or the psychology, there's a deal to be done here. Never, ever. If you're going to war, you go to war. If you go in with the mindset and they think it's that mindset, or you suggesting that they see that as a weakness.
Well, you don't go into battle or into war with foremost in your thoughts the terms of surrender. You can't possibly, because you've already lost.
Correct. That's the psychology again, and this is what the media are portraying, or certainly did going back a couple of years ago, that there was deals to be done.
Yeah.
The bank only see that as a weakness, and they'll hammer you on it.
And it is a weakness.
It is a weakness, of course it is. So that was, in summary, there is no instance of a country having benefited from prolonged warfare. So if you perceive yourself as a state, a country, or a sovereign, whatever it might be, and you can go on indefinitely, very much like the Vietnam War, then eventually they'll capitulate. They don't have a choice, because they'll eventually have to look at the cost of this, and say, well, somebody will have to call the shots on it. So they, in essence, they will lose ultimately if you're prepared to go to war over a long period of time.
This next one's very interesting. A wise general makes a point of foraging on the enemy. 1 cartload of the enemy's provisions is equivalent to 20 of one's own. So, Des, how do we contextualise that? Because I get what they're saying, but in a legal sense, it can be a little bit trickier.
Okay, right. Basically, they have, on the face of it, they have an unlimited resource available to them, okay? I.e. funds. Well, funds are only part of the picture, because you do not need funding to go to court, okay? So the other resource they have available to them is information. So very often what will happen is they'll put in a summons with an affidavit of some form. Now, the affidavit and the summons is part of their resources. They're putting this in. This is one of their weapons they'll use against you. So what you can do is you can use that affidavit that they have created and turn that and use that as one of your weapons. You can turn it around. Now, this is something that we have said time immemorial to people on a one-to-one basis in the schools and probably on the radio show, is that you're pretty much finished in a case if you start lodging a responding affidavit or replying affidavit to their affidavit, because you're allowing the judge the facility in terms of jurisdiction to make a decision based upon what your argument is versus their argument, and you will not win. It goes into a thing called equity then at that point. So what you can do then, if they have lodged an affidavit to support their motion, their application, their summons, whatever it might be, you can turn that affidavit around and say, right, what we want now in terms of what you've stated here, we want you to prove that affidavit. So you look for them to back up proof and provide proof of the statements they have made in that affidavit. Now, the court will want you to put in a replying affidavit, and they'll be eager to get you to put in this replying affidavit. But how can you if there's still questions in relation to what's contained within their affidavit?
So to play devil's advocate, if I come back at you and say, but it's a civil case, the onus is on me to prove my innocence. How do you counter?
Fair enough. I agree with you. That's absolutely 100% true. And I will be putting in a defence once we have answers to these questions of what you have stated. You have made statements here. We are questioning the validity of those statements. We want you to prove what you've stated. And on foot of that, we will lodge a defence stroke an affidavit.
Okay, so
We
it's
have
like
no problem doing that.
It's like a form of conditional acceptance, but you're seeking further clarity upon what they've said.
Correct. Now, obviously, you can do that in different forms, different guises, but you could lodge a motion into the court to provide particulars in relation to the affidavit that they have produced, and or send a notice of particulars, so on and so forth. So there's ways to get it in to the court to have the court understand that you are attempting to deal with this issue.
Yeah, so don't allow them to deceive you with their rules, because unless it's specifically stated that you can't do something, and you accept then that you can't.
But there are
then you
rules.
can.
There are rules of the court that facilitate you seeking particulars and motions for particulars and clarity and so on and so forth. So it's within their rules.
Sure, yeah.
No, they don't tell you that.
But use them. Again, send your spies out, use the information the spies bring back, and then actually put it into action. So you can have all the information in the world, but if you don't act upon it, well, you're not going to get anywhere.
So that's just a small example of using the enemy's resources, if you like. Now, there's loads more stuff that we will get into as time goes on, and we'll dip and dive and duck into bits and pieces like that. But yeah, it's certainly worth... It's what we're about, really, isn't it? It's using their resources.
It is, and there's one that I really like here. It comes down to psychological warfare. Supreme excellence consists in breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting.
Okay.
And now I know there are people listening and they're screaming at the radio or the podcast, whatever they're listening on. They're thinking, how can you win a war without fighting?
Well, it depends on what you define as fighting. I mean, in the early days of any case, it is a struggle, we'll call it. You know, it is. I mean, it is a struggle. But the struggle is getting on top of and getting an understanding of what's going on, understanding the law, understanding what it is they're attempting to do to you, and the psychology in what they're attempting to do. And again, we talked about this a little bit earlier in terms of the psychology and the coercion they have programmed into from a very early age. So it is a struggle to start with, but I wouldn't say it was like supreme. The statement is supreme excellence consists in breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. So once you get over your struggle, your psychological struggle of understanding, and again, your information you're gathering from your spies, blah, 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 you can break their will. You can attack them on fronts they do not expect in small ways with minute things. For example, a simple example, but again, we'll get into more detail as time goes on. There was one case I can think of, and one particular man, and ever without lodging a replying affidavit, he was in both the High Court and the Circuit Court a total of 4 times. Okay? 4 times over a period of, I think it's about 6 years.
Now, on the face of it, I'd imagine if you walked into a solicitor's office and said that, they'd say, well, that can't happen.
Well, it did. And he never lodged an affidavit.
Yeah.
He continued to lodge applications in terms of motions for them to provide information and data requests and la la la. So, but we also found small little minute ways of attacking them and then bringing it into the court. The stuff we were alleging in the end, I mean, there was a contempt of court issue, amongst other things. But we'll get into more detail of that sort of minutiae as time goes on. We'll throw in examples, specific examples of cases. Yeah. But in terms of breaking their will, in the end, we talked to the man and we said, look, after this case, I can't imagine they'll come at you again. Now, he was surprised that they came at him 4 times. But I said, I can't imagine them coming at you again because they failed, literally failed, to get what they wanted, which was your home, on 4 separate occasions. Now, if they do come at you again, we now know how to deal with them, first of all, and secondly, we can now attack them validly in terms of doing other stuff. So we made it clear with them before they decided to come again that we would go gung-ho for them if they came within a mile of them, if
Yeah.
you like, and they didn't. So they're very clear now that he is not going to sit back as he did before and just protect himself or defend himself. He will be all out for all-out war because he's crippled them 4 times.
And they know that he's willing to actually go the distance.
Yeah, absolutely. So he broke their will. Is that probably, the resistance, their will.
Yeah. No, that's a really good example.
Yeah.
The worst strategy, Des, of all is to besiege walled cities.
Well, again, it's like, you obviously commented on this as well, Lionel. I don't want to do all the talking here today. So it's basically know your enemy again and know yourself. I mean, why would you go on the attack when you don't know how to attack?
Yeah.
I mean, I'd be very keen to sit back, observe, watch, listen, learn, see what's going on, see how they approach, go and study what it is and the way and the methods that they use. Because you will not, going into their arena, if you like, having no knowledge, which is a walled city, you won't get past go on it if you don't have the right information and right tactics to start with. So the courtroom at the very outset is just like a walled city. You won't get through with ambiguities. There is a way through, but you have to, if you like, tear down something first before that happens. And you're better off not trying to tear it down to start with. You're better off just sitting back and letting them come to you.
And to do it from a distance, because to besiege something uses up resources, and we've spoken about what our resources are.
Yeah.
So that's playing our cards. So if you want to use up your resources, well, you're going to run out of them a hell of a lot quicker than they are. So maybe it can be prudent at times to become that walled city yourself.
Absolutely.
And let them expend their resources by trying to besiege you, because they certainly will if they think they can, and they won't necessarily be using the same deceptive methods that we're going to learn through studying this book.
Absolutely. Okay, what's the next one then? There are 5 essentials for victory. He will win who knows when to fight and when not to fight. Very clear.
Yeah.
He will win who knows how to handle both superior and inferior forces. Yeah, it comes along with knowing when to fight, not to fight,
Yeah.
and what's superior and what's inferior. He will win whose army is animated by the same spirit throughout all its ranks. So this goes down to basically, if you like, in a civil war, there's a psychology there amongst people that there's an invader coming in. So that's the psychology you need, is to realise that the state, the bank, the solicitors, they are the invaders, and you basically are morally protecting yourself. So there's a psychology there. He will win who prepared himself, waits to take the enemy unprepared. So there will be chinks in the armour that you will discover along the way, once you know what to look for and what to look out for. That comes with a bit of experience, a bit of study, a bit of knowledge, so on and so forth. So knowing what to look out for. The enemy in this case are not always prepared, much as they might give the impression in terms of deception. They are not always prepared. And if you're critically thinking about the art of war, when you're looking at this sort of stuff, you will see where they're not prepared, and you'll be able to attack them at those points.
Because it is worth bearing in mind over and over again that the enemy in this case are hugely arrogant, and they go through the motions because they're dealing with this on a daily basis. Most people will not defend themselves at all. So when they are met then with somebody who is actually thinking and strategizing, that can be a very, very difficult and dangerous opponent for them.
Yeah, well, a leading example would be a lot of the experience of many people that we've spoken to, both you and me, and ourselves as well, is when you're in a situation whereby you're cross-examining, for example, a Garda Síochána, they just cannot handle being cross-examined. Because
Not in any sense.
Yeah, they're not prepared for it, and they have also, I think their own ego gets on top of them as well. How dare somebody like you, one of the working, poorer, unwashed masses, how dare you cross-examine me? Right, and that's basically a fault in them, that they actually do think that you're inferior to them, which obviously is to your advantage, because they don't see you coming.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that succinctly covers it.
I think it does. It's a David and Goliath story, really.
Yeah. Okay.
Time to take a pause and ponder our next move. We will be back, of course, next week. This is the CLS Talks. I'm Lionel Coveney. He's Des Carty. Thanks, Des, for joining me.
Thanks, Lyle, and good luck, folks. We'll speak to you soon.
The CLS Talks.